Hi Year 7, it's Miss Theka here. Today we are doing one of my all-time favourite subjects, so I'm a little bit sad that we can't do this in school because normally this is a super fun lesson, but obviously we can't do that. But today we are thinking about war with Spain. So we have been looking at, for the past couple of lessons, some of the problems that Elizabeth I faced throughout her reign. And today we are looking at the end result of some of those problems. So all of the issues that have been bubbling up for quite a long time eventually leads to war with Spain, known as the Spanish Armada. And today we are thinking about how Elizabeth defeated the Spanish Armada in 1588. So date and title in as normal. Today's keyword is armada, which is the Spanish word for navy, and an armada is a war fought entirely at sea, as you can see in this image here. So date and title in, and then let's get cracking with the lesson. So, first of all, before we look at the battle itself and the reasons why Elizabeth won, we're going to think about why it actually started. So why did King Philip II of Spain launch the Armada against Elizabeth? Well, there are quite a few different reasons. Last lesson, we looked at Mary Queen of Scots. If you can remember, she was Elizabeth's Catholic cousin. She was Queen of Scotland and she was a big pain for Elizabeth. And right at the end of the lesson, it was revealed that Elizabeth had Mary executed in 1587. Some people say that this was the reason why the Armada was launched against Elizabeth, because Mary Queen of Scots was executed in 1587 and then Philip launched the Armada in 1588. So that seems like pretty good timing, doesn't it? In addition, you could argue that Philip might have launched the Armada because he was so cross that Elizabeth had executed Mary, because Mary was a Catholic and Philip was a Catholic as well. But actually, that's just a little bit of an excuse. That's not the genuine reason why Philip launched the Armada. How do we know this? We know this because actually Philip had been building his boats as early as 1585. That's 2 years before Mary was executed. So he certainly didn't prepare the Armada because Mary was executed, because otherwise he'd have to have like a magic crystal ball to be able to predict that she was going to be executed. But he did use that as a bit of an excuse. But actually, these are the 4 main reasons. So I'd like you to get these down for me, please, as I talk you through them. The first key reason was religion, and we've talked about this quite a few times when thinking about Elizabeth and the problems she had. Philip of Spain was a strong, devout Catholic, and he saw it as his job to rid the world of heresy. So one of my very first YouTube lessons I did with you was about some of the problems in the Roman Catholic Church. If you can remember, we talked about the word heretic. If you were a heretic, that meant that you went against the Roman Catholic Church and you could be burned at the stake for that. Well, this is what Philip is saying that Elizabeth essentially is. She's a heretic, and he wants to rid the world of heresy. He wants to kill Elizabeth because he believes that she goes against the Roman Catholic Church. He also had support from the Pope. The Pope is the head of the Roman Catholic Church. He lives in Italy, and the Pope had made a claim. He had said that if any soldiers had died in the fight to kill Elizabeth, then they would be rewarded in heaven by God when they died. So the Pope fully supported all of these plots, which again made a lot of Catholics think that this was the right thing to do, to fight and try to remove Elizabeth. The second reason is politics. Philip had his eyes set on England. He thought England would make a really useful addition to his empire. An empire, again, going back a little bit, we've not really talked about empire since we've talked about the Romans, which is the very first thing you did in Year 7 when you first started. An empire is when a strong, powerful country owns and controls other countries abroad. In this period of time, Spain had one of the largest empires in the world. It was so powerful, and Philip wanted to basically add England to his collection. England had been partially ruled by Philip before Elizabeth became queen. If you can remember, Elizabeth's sister, Bloody Mary, Mary Tudor, had been married to Philip when she was queen for a short time. So he had sort of had a little bit of power over England, and then when Mary died, he asked Elizabeth to marry him. She said no, and he effectively lost all of his control over England, which he thought was really annoying, and he wanted that power back. Number 3, provocation. If you provoke somebody, that means you're goading them, you're trying to get a reaction out of them. And this is something that Elizabeth quite enjoyed doing. Elizabeth was a little bit of a tease. She quite enjoyed really annoying Philip and Spain, even though she said that she was a queen of peace and that she didn't want war. On the sly, actually, she got her kicks from really annoying the Spanish. One of the ways she did that was through a man called Francis Drake, who we're going to talk about a little bit more later on. Francis Drake was one of Elizabeth's closest friends. It's said that they were actually boyfriend and girlfriend, but that was a secret. We don't really know if that's true or not. But for his job, he was a pirate. But Elizabeth used to encourage that, which is wrong really, because being a pirate is a crime. A pirate is someone, literally a little bit like, think of the cartoons. A pirate is someone who has a ship and they sail around and they attack other ships and they steal all of their goods. And that's what Drake did as a job. Why would Elizabeth encourage that? Well, because she used to pay him to attack Spanish ships and to pinch Spanish gold. So even though on the one hand, she knows that Francis Drake is quite naughty and he's a criminal, she liked him because he used to basically do whatever she asked him to do. So the Spanish saw Drake as a dirty pirate, and Elizabeth saw him as a national treasure, and she knighted him in 1581 for basically being a pirate. If you are knighted, that is one of the highest honours you can receive from a king or queen. And she stepped on board his ship in 1581 after he had sailed all the way around the world, and she knighted him and he became Sir Francis Drake. And that was a big no-no for Spain, because really she's basically celebrating the fact that he's a criminal, and he'd sunk loads of Spanish ships, he'd killed a lot of Spanish sailors, and he'd pinched a lot of Spanish gold. So that had really annoyed Philip. 4 circumstances. So the Armada came at just about the right time for Philip. Spain had gained Portugal in 1580, which had given Philip even more power than he had before, because now he's got access to all of Portugal's resources and soldiers. And also, Elizabeth was refusing to declare war on Spain. As I've just mentioned, she continually irritated, provoked, goaded Philip, but never actually declared war herself. So this made Philip feel like, right, the time is right. If she was strong enough, she would declare war on me, but she's not, so I'm going to declare war on her and we'll win. Well, at least that's what he thought. So what was Philip's strategy? Philip had 130 ships, 2,500 guns, around about 30,000 men, and he put them under control of this guy here, who was known as the Duke of Medina Sidonia. The aim of the game was that Medina Sidonia would sail the Spanish ships from Lisbon down in Spain, and they would join up with the Duke of Parma, who was one of King Philip of Spain's closest friends. The Duke of Parma was situated in the Netherlands. Now, I'll come back to that point in a second because I'm about to get geographical and I'm about to put a map up so you know what the situation is. The idea is that together, Medina Sidonia and the Duke of Parma would put all of their forces together. They would join up. Then they would sail to England, they would land in Kent, which is down south, they would march to London, kill Elizabeth, and enforce a new Catholic monarchy within England. The idea was at that point that Philip's daughter, Isabella, would actually take the English throne, because it couldn't be Mary Queen of Scots because she's now dead. So he thought he would put Isabella to rule in place of Elizabeth. So at this point in time, England, it's a little island, not many friends, lots of enemies, particularly across Europe. They're now facing the biggest, strongest, most powerful country in the world, which owned the largest, most well-known navy in the world at that point as well. So, how on earth did England win when all of the odds are stacked against them? And that's what we're thinking about today. So, normally we watch these together, but obviously we can't. So the first thing I want you to do is watch these two separate YouTube clips. I'm going to send you the links to these in an email, and I'll put them on class charts as well so you can find them. The first one is called The Defeat of the Spanish Armada, and it's 7 minutes 50 seconds long. And you'll know you're on the right one because it pops up straight away saying Gem Productions. It's quite a silly video, and normally we would recreate this together using like bananas and stuff like that. But I think it does show the story quite well in a bit of a silly way. And then the second link is a clip from a film which normally we would watch together, so it's really annoying that we can't watch it. It's called Elizabeth the Golden Age. It's quite a good film if you ever see it pop up on Netflix. It won quite a few awards, and this is slightly more realistic than the first one. It's a lot more realistic than the first one, and it shows you parts of the battles, although rather annoyingly it doesn't include Francis Drake in the film. Instead, it replaces him with someone else known as Sir Walter Raleigh. So when you're watching this clip, when they're talking about the guy, Walter Raleigh, they're actually talking about Francis Drake. But that's what happens when people make films about history. They just decide to chop and change people, which is super annoying. So pause me now. Go into an email or go on class charts, that's where they'll be. Find the links for both of these clips and watch them now for me, please, and think about the many different reasons why Elizabeth won. Right, so the next thing you're going to do, now hopefully you've been able to watch both of those clips, is you're going to explain to me all of the reasons why the Spanish Armada failed and why England was able to win. So we've got here a little thinking map. Again, normally we would have this stuck in the middle of a double page and we'd get loads of information coming off it, but we'll have to shorten it a little bit now. The three main sections that I want you to focus on, if you don't want to do all six, are this one here, English tactics and English skill, the weather, and better English ships. If you want to do all six, then you could also think about the expert advice that Elizabeth received, Spain's poor communication, and the fact that the Spanish Armada was badly supplied. So before I give you the information, I'm going to get this map up. I totally appreciate that this might be a little bit blurry, but that shouldn't matter too much. Right, okay, so it's important you know the geography of this battle because that played a key role in the defeat of the Armada. So we'll start down here. Spain and Portugal, who became a united country after Spain had added Portugal to its empire. This is where the Armada starts, in Lisbon, down here. The Spanish Armada, under the command of the Duke of Medina Sidonia, which, might I add, hopefully you've already seen this in one of the clips, Medina Sidonia had never been the head of a navy command before. He'd never done it. He was new to the job, and he had actually asked Philip of Spain if he could resign because he didn't want to do it, and Philip of Spain said, no, you have to do it. So that was already a problem before they'd even got going. They set off here to get through the English Channel. So this body of water here that runs along France, that's known as the English Channel. These red spikes here show the first kind of engagement that we saw, where Spanish ships and English ships came to battle for a slight period of time. But Spain's aim is to actually sail past England initially because they want to get here. So this is the Netherlands. At this point, Spain owns the Netherlands. That's another country that's a part of their empire. So it's known as the Spanish Netherlands. It was really important that the Spanish ships sailed past England first, docked here in an area known as Gravelines, stocked up with supplies, military equipment, more soldiers, and then come back and attack England. So here in the Spanish Netherlands, there's someone known as the Duke of Parma, and he is waiting for the Duke of Medina Sidonia to turn up so they can put their army together and then go back and attack England. That's important because whilst they are docked here in relatively, what's the word I'm looking for? Shallow water. Shallow water means it's not very deep. They are docked there, and Drake has a super impressive plan to force the Spanish ships to do something quite stupid. I'm going to talk to you a little bit more detail about this in a second, but you can see that it goes wrong, and that instead of coming back to attack England, for some reason that I'm going to talk to you about in a second, the Spanish ships are forced to sail all the way back round, past Scotland, past Ireland, and actually come back down to Spain again. And they never get the opportunity to attack England because of something that Francis Drake does. So I just wanted to give you that geography first before I talk through the information, or I was a little bit worried that you were going to kind of get a bit confused. Normally how I do this is I print out a huge map and we put it on the floor, and normally I bring in like bananas and I make them into boats and I show you that way, but obviously I can't do that. So information, this is what you are going to use to complete this mind map that I was talking through earlier to you. So it might be quite useful if you pause me for a second now and draw out this mind map so that when I put the information back on and read it to you, you can find the correct section and get your information coming off the mind map, alright? So pause me now, get this mind map down, and then I'll talk you through this information that you're going to need to complete it. Right, so there were many different reasons why the Spanish Armada was defeated, but here is some of the key information. A lot of this can be broken down so that you've got a couple of sentences coming off each of the kind of like 6 legs of your spider diagram. So I'm going to read this information to you, and then you can obviously pause me and add it to your mind map when you think you have got some information. So on the 19th of May 1588, the invincible, or so they thought they were invincible, Spanish Armada set sail from Lisbon on a mission to secure control of the English Channel and transport a Spanish army to the British Isles from the Netherlands. The fleet was under the command of the Duke of Medina Sidonia, and it consisted of 130 ships carrying 2,500 guns, 8,000 seamen and almost 20,000 soldiers. But the Spanish ships were slower and less well armed than their English counterparts. This is because a man called John Hawkins, who was a close advisor of Elizabeth, had designed a brand new type of ship known as the galleon, which was much smaller in size. So previously people had thought that you needed to have these enormous boats to be secure in the deep waters of the sea, but actually he had made a slightly smaller boat which was quicker to move on the water. It made it a bit more nimble, and that made it slightly more secure than the larger boats that the Spanish had. Delayed by storms that temporarily forced it back to Spain, the Spanish Armada did not reach the southern coast of England until the 19th of July. So it's quite a gap there, isn't it? From May until July. By that time, the British were ready for them, and the Spanish ships had been quickly repaired with poor quality wood. Some of the Spanish food supplies had already started to rot, and the men were going hungry already. So that's quite a few different problems there. So go to your mind map and see if you can get a couple of points coming off some of those sections already, and then I'll move on to the next one. The Spanish Armada continued to advance during the next few days, but its ranks were thinned by the English. On the 27th of July, the Armada anchored. So if you aren't particularly savvy with your boat knowledge, an anchor is a part of a boat that is really, really heavy, and it's sort of shaped like it's quite hard for me to explain, really. A bit like a big hook. And what boats do is they drop anchor. So this big, really, and when I say big, I mean like it weighs a ton. You wouldn't be able to lift it yourself. They reel up the anchor on like a wind, it's on a rope, and they chuck it overboard so that it sinks all the way to the bottom of the seabed, and it secures the boat so the boat doesn't move, it doesn't sail away. Even if it's super windy, the boat will stay still. So your anchor is a really important part of your boat. You certainly don't want to be going anywhere without your anchor. So anyway, the Spanish Armada anchored in quite an exposed position in an area known as Calais, which is a coastal part of France. The Spanish army prepared to embark from the Netherlands, so they are trying to get more equipment, more weaponry, more soldiers from the Netherlands. However, without control of the English Channel, which they don't fully have at this point, their passage back to England would be impossible. Furthermore, communication between the Spanish ships was really poor. Important messages were often delayed. Sometimes it would take 6 weeks to get a message from one Spanish ship to another, and by that point, obviously, things have changed. Many of the Spanish ships did not know what their next plan of action was, so quite a few of the Spanish ships felt a bit in the dark, didn't really know what was happening. And this is where it gets quite interesting. Just after midnight on the 29th of July, one of Elizabeth's closest advisors, Sir Francis Drake, came up with a really cunning plan, and you should have seen this in both of the clips. He ordered that some of the old English boats were to be set on fire, so they set alight their own boats. Obviously, they didn't stay on them, they jumped off them. Then they put the sail up so that the wind would take them. So these burning boats were then sent into the absolutely jam-packed harbour of Calais. It's jam-packed because the Spanish have docked all their boats there and they've dropped their anchors because they weren't planning on going anywhere just yet. All of a sudden, you're a Spanish man on your boat that is anchored and you see a burning boat coming towards you. Well, you would absolutely panic because boats are made out of wood and they burn really, really quickly. So if this burning boat bumps into your boat's going to set on fire and you're going to be on a burning boat. So all of a sudden, the panicked Spanish ships were forced to cut their anchors and then sail away to avoid catching fire. Now, that was a seriously bad move. Really bad move. Why cut it? Well, because it actually takes quite a lot of time to wind your anchor up. So in just sheer panic, they said, cut anchor and sail away, not thinking about how devastating this would be later down the line, because a boat without an anchor is in quite a vulnerable position. So the disorganised fleet, and they're now completely out of formation, they really don't know what they're doing, was attacked by the English off Gravelines. That's what I was talking about earlier. If I just jump back here, this part is known as the Battle of Gravelines. That's where the burning boats was, and that forces the Spanish ships up north, which is where they really didn't want to be going. In the decisive battle, the superior English guns had won the day. The devastated Armada was forced to retreat north to Scotland. The English navy pursued the ships for a certain amount of time just past Scotland, and then they turned back. And this is where something amazing happens. So, be this luck, coincidence? Elizabeth certainly didn't think it was coincidence. She said that God had done this on purpose. Anyway, whether you believe in things like that is obviously up to you, or whether you just think it was pure luck. When the Spanish ships came round off the coast, if I just put the map back up, when they come round off the coast of Scotland, and when they come round here in the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of Ireland, they are hit by an enormous storm. It was said to be a storm like no one had ever seen before. They were completely battered. In addition, they have got a dire lack of supplies, so the men are already weak, because if you look up here, at the start of July, they were already running out of food, and their food was rotting. And they're now getting absolutely hounded by terrible, terrible storms. Some of the damaged ships foundered in the sea, which basically just means they kind of just floated around in the sea for a while, whilst others were driven onto the coast of Ireland, and they were completely wrecked by all the rocks off the coast of Ireland. As many of the ships had cut their anchors earlier to escape from Drake's burning boats, they now can't secure themselves during these rough storms. That's one of the first things you would do on a large boat if the weather really took a turn for the worse. You would drop anchor, because that means that you can't flip, you can't turn turtle. Turn turtle is like a term they use when basically your boat goes all the way around, which obviously is not what you want it to do, but they can't drop their anchor because they've cut them. So really, this is not a position that you would want to be in. A lot of the men drown at sea. By the time the last of the surviving fleet had managed to get back to Spain in October, half of the original Armada was lost and 15,000 men had died. And that's it. Elizabeth had won the Armada, even though it seemed like she couldn't possibly defeat the Spanish. For all of these different reasons, she did. So hopefully you've been able to fill this mind map full of loads of different reasons as to why the Armada won, and this should help you think about this interpretation. So this is debated by historians quite a lot. Did Elizabeth win the Armada because she was skilled, or did she win it because she got lucky? So you tell me, do you agree with this interpretation? I think the main reason Elizabeth won the Armada was because she was lucky. Do you agree, or do you think actually it was because of skill? If you go back to your mind map, there are some things on here that are pure skill. Elizabeth's expert advice, she employed the right men for the job, and they did a fantastic job. English tactics and skill, the brand new boats, the new designs of the boats, Drake's really clever tactic, sending in the burning boats, chasing the Spanish off around the coast of Scotland, all that is skill. But there is evidence to suggest that actually Elizabeth did kind of get a little bit lucky. The Armada were badly supplied, their wood wasn't very good, so their food had started to rot, their communication wasn't very swift, so a lot of them didn't know what they were doing, as well as the Duke of Medina Sidonia had never gone to sea before, whereas people like Drake were experts at sea, and the weather. We can't control the weather. As much as Elizabeth claimed that God had done this on purpose, we know that we can't control the weather, so that was just luck. So, what do you think? Interpretation, write your judgment now. The main reason Elizabeth won the Armada was because she was lucky. Do you agree or not? So it's just going to be one lesson from me this week, because this is quite a long lesson, so this will definitely take you more than an hour to get through. Then we've got half term, and then I'll crack on again and do some more YouTube lessons with you after half term for the last little chunk before we reach the summer holidays. It's really nice to get some emails off you to say how much you're enjoying the YouTube videos. I really appreciate that. They're not ideal. Sometimes they don't work, and it can be a little bit of a pain if you've only got sort of one computer at home. So I really appreciate those that are finding the time to watch them, and people that have emailed me to say that you're enjoying them. Hope you are enjoying them. Anyway, after half term, I might try to arrange a meeting on Teams with some of you, so you can kind of see me and you can ask any questions and we can have a little bit of a chat, because for some of you it's going to have been months and months and months before I'll actually have been able to like speak to you, which is a little bit weird. So I'll definitely try to arrange a Teams meeting for those of you. You might have maybe done it with some of your other teachers already, but I'll do them after half term so we can have a little bit of a chat and a little bit of a catch up as well. Okay, thanks for listening again, and I'll speak to you later.